Welcome to Epistemology Online, where the idea is to get people to articulate what they believe to be true and false, good and evil, and their rationale behind it. Hopefully a different way of discourse online. This is part 1 of 3, talking with John. Hello, everybody. Kaysen here. I saw this gentleman named John over to my left, I guess, screen right. He was in a Facebook thread where somebody was talking about kind of government and using a wealth tax to get stuff done, as one might say. And John had some really interesting things to say on the topic, so I kind of wanted to kind of get your views. Like, what do you think about people, or not people, what do you think about the idea or the policy of government using a wealth tax to get something done?
Well, in general, I would be opposed to it. I wouldn't say it's unconstitutional as far as I know, because we do give Congress the power to levy taxes. And as long as the people being taxed, in this case, the 1% or the 0.01% billionaires, they do have representation. So it wouldn't be unconstitutional, but it would be, in my opinion, illiberal, which I think is bad enough, really. Yeah.
When we say illiberal, what do you mean by a liberal? Because I would assume most liberals are totally down with the idea of a wealth tax, right?
Yeah. And that, I think, comes from a kind of a fundamental misunderstanding of what liberalism is. It's kind of sad because it's actually, I think, the best political philosophy out there, as it was first formulated by John Locke in Two Treatises of Government. And I think most modern day liberals or neoliberals aren't actually liberal or don't believe the core tenets of liberalism. So I think that's a problem. Yeah.
What are the kind of the core tenets of liberalism, as you would define it?
That would be fundamentally natural law and natural rights. Basically, natural law is the existence of certain obligations or duties, and rights would be to have from nature or from God, which would be the right to life, liberty, property. Those are the big three. Our Declaration changed it to pursuit of happiness, but that's where we go. And of course, for this topic, property is really the kind of important, because in liberalism, the idea of property is that once you add your labor to something in nature, it becomes your property, and no other person or government has the right to take it from you without due process.
So kind of the whole ethos of it kind of revolves around two foundations. You said natural law and natural rights. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, gotcha.
That's
well,
right.
let's just talk about those for a second. So how confident are you on a scale of, like, say, 1 to 100, or 0 to 100, 0 being not confident at all, 100 being 100% confident, there's no doubt in your mind, that something like, pick which one was more important for this particular discussion, the idea of natural rights, right?
Yeah. Since we're talking about someone's property, in this case, their money, yeah. And sorry, what was your question?
Yeah, so how confident are you that that is true? Like 100% being I'm 100% positive, and 0 being I'm not very confident at all. It's like a random chance, or somewhere in between.
If I can be so bold, I'll say I'm 100% confident that is true. There's a lot that goes into it, but I've read it and I've agreed with it, and until something better comes along, which I don't think it has, because I think it's eternal, I think that's the truth, and that's the case.
So it seems to kind of come from the idea of, like, self-ownership. That was one thing you mentioned in the thread, like you're entitled to your body and, like, what you use your body to create. Is that a fair way of saying that?
Yeah. Since all people are equal, everyone has liberty, and no one is owned by another person. I think we can all agree on that, at least. The fruits of their labor also belong to them. So, yes.
Okay, cool. Now, is there I'm going to try to find an edge case where you may try to like contradict like the original principle. Is there an edge case that you can think of that would invalidate the concept of, I'm going to put it in layman's terms, like you own yourself and you own what you do with yourself?
Yes. Is there something that contradicts it?
Is there an edge case where that would no longer be valid?
Yes. Yeah. If you invade the natural rights of another, forfeit your rights. That could look like if you break into someone's house and try to steal all their stuff, you forfeit your right to your life. It's kind of scary, but I mean, if you do that to someone, they would have the right to preserve their life. And if that means themselves, that's kind of what happens. Or you have rights and you also have duties. So in two treatises, Locke talks about how people who have things do have a duty to charity. So charity is the that you have to people who don't have as much. He goes as far to say it's a sin against God to let your brother starve to death out of his lack if you have a lot. So there are cases where there are some overriding things, but does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, I think it does. So the first one seems to be an objective thing that I could witness with my senses, being if somebody is taking something from someone else, then we don't have to like reciprocate that right. We don't have to, like I can't say that all property rights should be protected and then take someone's wallet. In that case, someone could take a wallet from me. So that one, I think I understand. The second one, the duties side of thing, I'm not sure how to make that kind of universalizable or objective. You were saying like if somebody has a lot, then they have a duty. Like in the example, if somebody has a lot of food, they have a duty to feed somebody else. How do you know like where the line is? Like have a duty, not have a duty?
Yeah, I think that's kind of where all of the debate stems from. And originally, going back to the overriding principle, is basically you want to, and honestly, it's kind of similar to the libertarian non-aggression principle, but in two treatises, I keep referring to it because that's what I've read. Locke says that basically you have the right to as much property as you can use without it spoiling. So back in the pre-currency days, if you're gathering a bunch of apples or whatever, or harvesting stuff, you can gather as much as you can actually use. If you take so much to where it spoils, you can't use it, you are invading the share that was your neighbor's, because he could be using that and you're just letting it spoil. Since the advent of things that don't spoil, like money, you are morally allowed to gather as much money as you want, but the things that spoil would still be something that you shouldn't just gather everything up. So as far as charity goes, it's something that you really can't legislate. It's kind of, it's hard. It's not something you want the government in control of, like how much you should be giving to people. But I think probably a basic thing that most people could agree on is that no one should starve to death while someone nearby has plenty of food.
So I was recently in a conversation with somebody who talked about a kind of similar principle, and the idea behind it was like if you see something going wrong or going south, or somebody doesn't have enough, you're under a moral obligation to give that person money or medical aid or a lift to the hospital or whatever it is that's in your power, even if it's inconvenient to you, kind of like the story of the Good Samaritan, right? Like he went way out of his way to take care of somebody. And I had some questions, because it seems like that ethic would be applicable to this, except for the thing that you mentioned, that money doesn't spoil. So is it just a matter, would you agree that if something does spoil, then you can't have more than what you can consume without it spoiling? Like avocados go bad really quick. Like I get a thing of guacamole, I take a chip, I have one dip and then like it seems like immediately it's all brown and gross. So like, should I be having like a fiesta all the time to have people come over and eat the guacamole? Like as a silly edge case, just because that has a really short shelf life.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what he wrote down in his treatises, and it seems completely reasonable to me, and it seems moral. So yeah, I wouldn't say you should be a hoarder of things that are just going to go to waste.
I totally agree with the idea that it would probably be better if people don't hoard things. But my question is more like, can someone stop another from, like, hoarding doesn't sound right, but like having a thing of guacamole? I'm using that as a silly edge case because it does go bad really quickly.
So I guess someone has a massive, like, gallon bowl of guacamole.
No, just one. Just like a normal like single serving kind of thing, and like if I don't get to it in time, it seems like it goes brown overnight. If I don't eat the whole thing,
like a right to go and eat that, even though it didn't belong to them, is what you're saying, kind of.
Yeah, I'm wondering if somebody else would have the right to go to my fridge. Let's assume that the fridge was accessible; they wouldn't be trespassing, etc. Would they have like the moral right to go in and take what they need? Because, well, it's gonna spoil anyway because he's asleep, and it'll be gone by 8 a.m. As a silly, super silly example.
I would have to say that is tricky. Yeah, I would have to say because by the original person who took it in the first place took more than they could use. That is an invasion of the other person's right to that same guacamole in this case. So I would say yeah.
Right on. And I know we're way off the topic of government and wealth taxes, but I think if we can get this principle down, then I think probably the question might become more easy to answer, I suppose. So is there any way to make the moral claim that one ought not have more than they can consume if the good is perishable? Is there a way to test that claim?
How so?
Yeah, so like if I put forward a claim in physics that if I drop something, it will fall up, we have a way of testing that to see if it's logically consistent, which would be like, well, things technically could all fall up, like gravity could be exactly inverse. So logically, it's consistent. And then we got to go to like empirical verification, which would be like, well, dropping the thing and realizing that it falls down, in which case we'd invalidate our hypothesis. So fundamentally, John Locke, right? Two Treatises on Government?
Yes.
He puts forth the idea of that you ought not, not just like aesthetically, but like morally, like could be physically prevented from having more than that which could spoil, which it seems like that would then justify the idea of like a wealth tax or any kind of tax, because, well, technically we all die and there's not many U-Hauls hauled behind the hearses, you know? So it's like eventually the money's going to spoil. It's not going to be useful to you, right?
Well, it does kind of address that kind of situation in that, so obviously there are rights and there are duties, and the duty to charity does exist and is a real thing, but one of the duties of mankind is to be fruitful and multiply, is what he says. And that is preserve the human race. And the way we do that is with our children. And so you have a duty as a parent to preserve your children. And so passing on what you've made in your lifetime to your children is your duty, just like it is to keep them alive and feed them. So is it spoiling to give it to your kids? Well, I guess we do use the term "we spoil our kids," but but it is still a parent's duty to provide for them and make sure they're, good to go.
Okay, gotcha. So I think I have found a potential edge case that I'd like your thought on. So a billionaire that somebody wants to tax their wealth at 100%. Typically, you would be opposed to this, right?
Yeah.
On the grounds that money doesn't spoil, is that correct, that money doesn't spoil, or is it that they own themselves and they deserve the property of their labor, which is kind of the important principle?
both, yeah, because money is durable. I mean, so it's never going to go bad. It's not going to rot. So yeah, since it's durable, they are morally able to keep it and give it to their children when they die.
So here's the edge case. They never have kids. What would you say to that?
Well, so if they never have kids, is it okay to tax them 100% after $1 billion?
After any arbitrary amount, but we could say $1 billion or 10 billion. The number, I suppose, is quite adjustable. It's just, can it morally be done? I suppose in your ethic.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. If they didn't have kids, which a person's or a parent's duty is to their kids, if they didn't have any, then their duty below that would just be mankind in general. So if they die and the money's just going to sit there in a bank account doing nothing, then it would, I think, unless I'm misspeaking here, it would be perfectly consistent with natural law and natural duties to tax that money 100% and use it for the benefit of mankind. Yep.
Okay, gotcha. Wow, fascinating. I wasn't expecting that. Just so you know, the 15-minute timer has run out, so you're not under any obligation to hang out any longer. But this is fascinating because I thought whenever I saw you talking on that particular post that you'd be like, oh, there's no way that you could ever come up with a situation where you can tax somebody at like 100% based on how you talked. That's fascinating. I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that was probably one of the things that I guess maybe libertarians get accused of, and John, I think most people know who John Locke is, but he would get accused of as being this really greedy, it's all about property and everything like that. But I mean, if you read it, there are duties like preserving mankind. Like that is the whole point of all these natural rights and natural laws, is things that are detrimental to humans are bad. and so you can make it, I think you can make a perfectly fine case that if you have no descendants to will your money to, then you should use it for the benefit of mankind.
So if someone had kids, you would say that unless a law is passed, that a wealth tax would not be right to do. But if somebody passed a law because it would be constitutional, then it would be morally right. Is that correct?
Sort of. Like, I don't think just because it's American law, it's morally right. And I don't think it's supposed to be either. Like, I don't think natural law and U.S. law are 100% exact and should even, because natural law is kind of based off of divine law, and you're not supposed, it's a bad idea to legislate morality in general and legislate sin. You're not supposed to do that for reasons. So if a law was passed with the wealth tax, it would be constitutional because, like I said earlier, billionaires have representation in Congress. They've consented, even though they are a tiny, tiny minority. What is the 0.1%, if not a minority? That is the majority kind of stepping on the property of the minority. In this case, they have a lot of influence because they are rich. But that is a massive majority against a tiny minority. So it would be constitutional. And if it was the law, you should follow it because that's how we set it up.
Interesting. So it seems like there's an underlying, principle at work that because somebody has consented to like the particular form of government that's over them, that they ought to comply, even if, I think you said it was, they're such a small minority, almost like to the level of like a minority of the individual versus a massive majority, right?
Yeah.
Like if we just went with like the number one and we assume stock prices all stay the same, I guess Jeff Bezos would be the guy. So like if it's Jeff Bezos versus, 350 plus million Americans, then that's an interesting kind of ethic there.
Yeah. And we are set up to kind of protect the minority, but when it's 1% versus 99, I don't think even the Constitution can protect them from that.
Right. Would you say that the Constitution is a binding document?
Yes. Yep.
This is kind of a separate thing. I'm just going to throw up another 15 minutes if you're game, and we'll talk about the Constitution with, kind of your thoughts on that if you're game.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
My hope is that people can start listening to what other people are saying and try to understand like how they're thinking. That's kind of my goal.